Mr. Naim, I'm tired when you're watching SDTV. Cutting down trees and raising down the forest cover is no more a topical or a local issue. It's not even environment. It's climate change, and it's a matter of security of the people because of the climate risk and all that. So something has to be done. Ultimately, somebody has to bring in some sort of a solution that stops the mafias to cutting down timber so ruthlessly, and awake them, awake the authorities who's responsible to protect the same national treasure to do their job. We have seen the supply side is working very poorly. What are the demand side initiative and how that needs to be done? We have just seen that in this floods, we have seen huge logs of timber which was cut down and was placed or stored at some place that ultimately they would be trucked down to the population centers for furnitures and wooden doors and all sort of very popular wood in Pakistan. They called it, they are very expensive, however. So we have seen all that. We have today with us a very eminent expert on that, Mr. Muhammad Rafiq. He's been the country head of the IUCN, which was sort of a first UN established agency for the environment, and right now he's giving consultation globally on the same issue. Rafiq's a very warm welcome. Say something on which I've just said a few things as a basic premise, and then we'll rumble on.
Thank you very much. You have brought up a very important issue, and as you said, the recent floods have brought it to the fore that the climate change is driving seasonal changes, including the distribution of rainfall over time and space. Related to it is the issue of floods and the role that the forests or the lack of forests or deforestation plays in mitigating or accentuating the impacts of floods. But we also have to think that the role of trees is not only important on the watersheds where the rain falls mostly and then comes down as a runoff and feeds into the river and streams, and when they overflow, of course, they become floods. But they also have a role to play in the plain area, which is the lower riparian area. In Pakistan's case, it would be the plains of Punjab and Sindh all the way down to the Arabian Sea. Very few people actually talk about it, but the riparian forest of Pakistan played a hugely important role in all the Indus Basin in the lower riparian is the first line of defense against the floods. One was, of course, the river Spain was quite wide, so it could accommodate as much water as it would come. And over time, we have tried to tame the river, put dams, but also the cultivation. It has narrowed down and it overflows periodically. But when it overflows, these riparian forests would break both the speed of flood and the amount of water, because the amount of water gets more time to absorb. So the inland, both the farmlands and the human settlements and economic infrastructure would be better protected. So I just wanted to make that point, that the role of trees or the forest in containing or preventing flood, containing them, and mitigating their impact is more universal than is often thought about.
So why we have miserably failed even to protect these reserved forests, I've been you were mentioning Kalam, that the pencil straight trees were there and they were curved at the bottom because of the ice. They would stop avalanche and all sort of this Pathar ka Salab sort of, which you've seen, these boulders coming, just bearing down all of the village near in Bonaire and all that, which was very unusual. Why we have miserably failed to do for the reason these institutions and legal infrastructure was developed.
You know, it is a reflection of the overall degradation of the political and governance infrastructure and how it operates in Pakistan. And it has been a steady decline. Everybody knows, everybody talks about it, and we keep hoping a lot of time against the hope that things will change. But each time we surprise ourselves when it gets worse. So the forest management is no exception. Traditionally, forests were very well managed because that the Forest Service, which was created by the colonial British ruler, it was well resourced in terms of both the quality of the manpower that they would induct, the quality of the training, and the independence and authority which they had entrusted to these people who would exercise that judgment on how forests are managed. I can go into details that how forest was management was very different from other civic services, for example. Often forest officers used to be coming from the army, and initially, and they would be trained in Forest Institute, which was, interestingly, for example, in India, it's located very close to where the Indian military academy is, Dehradun. When Pakistan was created, the military academy was placed in Abbottabad, and so was the Pakistan Forest Institute, which was created as a substitute for the Indian Research Institute. And then from Abbottabad, it was moved to Peshawar, and a new system was created, a whole new institution, building, etc. And it did serve as a very prime institution of raising the corps of foresters who would be very able, competent to do that job. It's probably going into too much details, but you would find it interesting that out of the different trainings which would be carried out, like different civil services, apart from the medical profession, forestry was the most practical training. Out of the 2 years of course that one would do at Pakistan Forest Institute, you would spend nearly 14 to 16 months in the field. You will be out there seeing and doing actual things. For example, if I have in my real life write a forest management plan, I was already be writing one during the training as part of my training. And since the forest department also maintains or used to maintain its infrastructure like forest roads and buildings, rest houses and offices, we would also be trained in civil engineering. And very few people know that we would spend 1 month in the Military College of Engineering in Risalpur, where we would learn bridge construction. So don't get surprised if foresters tell you that I can design a cantilever bridge, which even today's probably engineering graduates wouldn't be able to do. So that is where it started off. But over the period has declined dramatically. And a major watershed, I would say, was two in this. One was when Pakistan Forest Institute decided for financial reasons to open forest education, which previously was basically a pre-service training. People would be inducted in the job first, and then they would be trained, and then they would be put out. They made it into an open education, so you could go and pay your fee and get a master or bachelor degree, which lowered the quality of the training. And the second watershed was when the Pakistan Forest Institute was, after the 18th Amendment, surrendered by the federal government and taken over by the provincial government. It definitely lowered its stature in the country internationally, but it also didn't do any good because in the province it was essentially seen as a place where you can employ some lower grade people and give people job, and the minister or the secretary could take the house of the director general or whatever. So, from big thinking, big mechanism of excellence in forestry, it dropped down to how I can benefit by doing small little things.
Yeah. So you are convinced that in this current flood, one of the reasons was that the forest cap has been lowered?
Yes. So this lowering of the forest competence, if I can say, I'm using this word in overall in terms of both technical competence, but also the governance, the structures, but the management, the leadership. When it went down, it had a very strong bearing on the management of the forests themselves, which further impacted by the politicization of the Forest Service, like any other civil service, where political interference became ever more. So the two together, there was some level of corruption associated with forest management. Always, one can argue both for and against it, whether it was there or not there or how much there, but there was some level of it. But with the politicization and lowering of the competence, this became more prominent, so to say, and it took a bigger space. So now there were three forces driving deforestation, if I can call it that way. The lowering of the forestry training and competence, the politicization of the service, and the unaccountable, rampant corruption.
What should we do now?
It's always easy to destroy. It's always difficult to build. Destruction, probably you can pull down a building in minutes, but you will take months, years to rebuild it. So one, it definitely has to rebuild that governance management infrastructure back to a point where it becomes robust and can meet the present day needs of forest management, because the forest management needs have fundamentally changed. And this is another point that we can come back to later. So you have to be prepared to give it time. Think about it over 10, 20 years. Start now and have a very clear path with milestones how you are rebuilding or even enhancing this forest management infrastructure in terms of the organization, its competence management.
Do you think we need to restore through legislation this forest institution and all this reception to its previous level by bringing back to the concurrent list or something like this?
You know, I wouldn't say that going big is the
Possible.
no. It may be possible, but may not be the right thing to do. But not correcting the distortion would also be a mistake. So my answer to your question is it will be a combination of undoing some of the bad things that have been introduced or have crept into the legislation and the management infrastructure, and using it as a foundation to build further on it and more, because the needs of today's forestry are very, very different.
You know, land is a prime resource for building colonies and housing and hotels and whatnot, and so is the timber for new housing and the furniture and all sort of. Do you think that with this corruption rampant and all that which is happening, timber and land mafia are very much involved, and they are primarily responsible for this?
I would say largely timber mafia. I would say 80%, and maybe definitely 20% is the 30. But it depends also on the real estate mafia. But if you look at it varies in the mountains where you have more of these valuable forests, so conifer forests. It's more the timber mafia. But if you look at Sindh, it is more the land mafia, because most of the forest
Even
land
in Punjab,
most
you've
of the
seen what happened in Lahore.
most of the forest land has been taken over by these politicians, landlords, people of influence under various pretexts. So these are definitely, you have identified really two very important factors.
So you agree that it's a sort of somewhere more than governance and competence, it's a political issue as well.
Political, I consider political as a part of the governance.
Okay.
Because polity basically collectively shapes the the government infrastructure, who goes into the parliament, who is the member of the National Assembly, who are members of the Senate. They together, the polity of the country places these people into these houses, and then they take decisions and use their influences a lot of time wrongly, sometimes positively as well. But in our experience, a lot of time they're driven by self-interest. The national interest really takes a second seat.
If I ask you towards the fag end of this interaction, if I ask you to give us one-liner or two-liner for just to sum up, what would you say?
I would say the political leadership needs to think beyond the next election and think about the country 50 years or 100 years from now. I haven't seen, maybe except the Constitution itself, any policy document or any planning document which would say where we want to be in 50 years from now as a country, as a nation. And then be prepared to take decisions, even if they are difficult to take now. They may not be politically popular or maybe viable, but difficult. People may not be accepting, objecting, etc. But you have to be prepared to think and act in the larger interest of public. And that's what I would say would be one thing. And the second, I would say, is the implementation infrastructure, which again includes the governance, the corruption, the competence, that they need to be addressed to be able to implement, which the government with a long-term vision would define.
Thank you very much. So the bottom line is that long-term vision should the politicians or who are the governors actually who govern things more, they should make plan for the think beyond the next election, think for the longer term, think for posterity, for their children and their grandchildren. That is the way to resolve these things.
And to give you just one example, and I'm personally fascinated by it, and I keep bringing it, and thank you for this opportunity. You know, one of the major issues that we are facing as a country is of the water. Water and forest are related, as we discuss and see. How can you address the issue of water scarcity, which is already there, the droughts and floods, the twin mutually contrasting realities? On a day-to-day basis, we scramble and do something and leave a lot of people stranded and helpless. But what we are lacking is long-term, because as a country, we have two options. Either you can store this water in surface reservoirs, which is lakes, ponds, dams, big dams, small dams. We can do that. Or we can also conserve this water, our surplus water, underground, recharging the aquifers. Now, each of them has its own implications. But what I miss, and I haven't seen, either in Parliament or outside, even in the public, any discourse, what among the two strategic options is a better one for the country. And if it's not one or the either, in what combination we might do that. Why we are not having this conversation? So if you go for surface water, so you have already seen in the India-Pakistan conflict, the dam in Neelam, it was in Neelam Jhelum or Sukhi Kinari? No, Neelam Jhelum. That the crest of the dam was hit by one of the intrusion from India, which means the dams are vulnerable to external threats. And it's not only that the dam could be damaged, what the flooding will cause is even. So that's an exposure, it has a cost, you have to be prepared to deal with it. Maybe we are, maybe you're not, I have no idea. On the other hand, aquifer makes more sense because it's more protected and you can access it when you want it. But the downside of the aquifer is that you have to pump that water up. For that you need, again, power, electricity, or some sort of way to pump it out and then to transport this water across. So these are the pros and cons, and there may be others.
Or maybe combinations.
So, you know, that's the kind of discussion that national level needs to happen.
Yeah. So thank you very much for giving us this very sumptuous, ample time. And with this, we come to the end of the program. Bye for now.